Michael Carter never imagined his life would collapse so suddenly. At 29, with calloused hands from years of construction work and a heart full of hope, he believed he had finally built the foundation of a stable family. But on a quiet morning in the small Midwestern town of Maplewood, his world cracked apart. Sarah, his wife of 3 years, left a note on the kitchen counter, packed her clothes and disappeared, leaving behind their newborn twins. The sound of silence in that modest house was heavier than any hammer Michael had ever swung. He stood in the middle of the living room, holding Ethan in one arm and Emma in the other, staring at the door that had closed for the last time. His chest tightened as he realized he was now both mother and father. Bills stacked on the counter, diapers scattered across the floor, bottles left half-filled. His new reality pressed down like a weight he didn't know how to carry. "Daddy's here," he whispered, kissing Emma's forehead as her tiny fists opened and closed in restless sleep. "I promise I won't leave you." Ethan's small cry filled the room, a fragile reminder of responsibility that gave Michael no room for despair. Neighbors soon caught wind of what had happened. Maplewood was the kind of town where news traveled faster than the wind over the fields. By the afternoon, whispers filled the grocery store aisles and heads shook at the diner. Sarah left him with 2 babies. He'll never manage on his own. Michael could feel the weight of their judgment whenever he stepped outside, but he forced himself to keep walking. Every corner of the house reminded him of her absence. The faint smell of Sarah's perfume lingered in the bedroom. The rocking chair she once used sat still by the window, and the closet hung empty where her dresses had been. He tried not to look, but grief slipped into his bones during the quiet hours of the night. He would wake to the twins crying, stumble through the darkness, and whisper encouragement to himself like a prayer. One bottle at a time, one diaper at a time. Just don't stop moving. On the 3rd night after Sarah's departure, exhaustion hit him so hard he collapsed onto the couch without realizing Ethan was still cradled in his arm. He woke in a panic at dawn, terrified he had failed them already. Holding both children against his chest, he broke into tears. For the first time in years, Michael Carter admitted he was scared, but fear wasn't all that lived in him. Beneath the weariness, a spark of resolve began to glow. He wasn't going to let Maplewood's gossip decide his future. He wasn't going to let Sarah's absence define his children's childhood. Somewhere inside, he believed that this broken start could become a story of strength. And before we go deeper into this journey, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. You won't want to miss what comes next in Michael's fight to protect his family and turn despair into triumph. Days stretched into weeks, and Michael began learning on the fly. He balanced bottles while reheating soup, propped open baby books with his elbows, and called his mother for advice when the fevers came. He showed up at the construction site with dark circles under his eyes, yet he kept hammering, kept building, because he had no other choice. Still, the nights were the hardest. He would sit on the porch after rocking the twins to sleep, staring out at the silent streets of Maplewood. The crickets sang in the grass, the air smelled of dust and cornfields, and the stars stretched endlessly above him. He wondered how he would make it through the next day, yet when he turned back inside, the sight of Ethan and Emma's peaceful faces gave him the courage to try. His life had been shattered, but somewhere inside the pieces, he sensed the outline of something new. The first step had been survival. The next would be endurance. And as the months unfolded, that endurance would be tested in ways Michael never imagined. The first winter after Sarah's departure was brutal. The cold winds of Maplewood cut through Michael's jacket as he hurried to and from the construction site, his mind never far from the twins waiting at home. Every day felt like a balancing act, and every night tested the limits of his endurance. At the site, the foreman barked orders, unimpressed with Michael's sluggish pace. "Carter, you're dragging again," he snapped one morning. Michael wiped sweat from his brow, hiding the fact that he had been up all night with Emma's fever. "I'll get it done," he muttered, forcing his muscles to move faster. By evening, he would stagger through the front door of his small house, greeted by the wails of Ethan and Emma. The kitchen counters were littered with bottles, and the sink overflowed with dishes he never had time to wash. He often set the twins down on a blanket in the living room, speaking softly as he tried to prepare something edible. "You two deserve better than this," he whispered, stirring a pot of pasta with one hand while bouncing Ethan with the other. His exhaustion clung to him like a second skin, yet he found himself smiling whenever their tiny eyes met his. Nights blurred into each other. Michael would rock Emma until his arms ached, then lay her down only for Ethan to cry minutes later. He paced the floors with heavy steps, humming lullabies off-key, praying the neighbors wouldn't complain about the noise. Sometimes he would catch his reflection in the darkened window, a gaunt face, stubble creeping across his jaw, eyes red from sleeplessness. Bills piled higher, their edges curling on the kitchen table. Mortgage notices, electric bills, medical expenses for the twins, all stamped with urgency he couldn't meet. Each envelope felt like a reminder that he was failing. He thought about selling his old truck, but it was the only way he could get to work. Still, there were small mercies. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman next door, would occasionally appear at his door with a casserole dish. "You look like you need a warm meal, Michael," she said kindly. He tried to protest, but she waved him off. "Don't argue. Those babies need you strong." Her kindness felt like a lifeline. Despite the strain, moments of light broke through the gloom. One evening, after a grueling day, Michael collapsed onto the rug beside the twins. Ethan reached for his finger, gripping it with surprising strength while Emma gurgled with laughter at the sight of his tired smile. Michael felt something shift inside him, a reminder that his children didn't see his failures. They only saw their father, present and loving, but the pressure never stopped mounting. His foreman warned him again after he missed a shift when Emma's fever spiked. "One more day like this, Carter, and you're out." The word stung deeper than the winter wind. Losing his job would mean losing the roof over their heads. That night, staring at the foreclosure notice pinned to the fridge, he wondered how much longer he could endure. Lying awake, listening to the steady breaths of his children, he whispered into the darkness, "I won't let this break us. I don't know how, but I'll find a way." His voice trembled, but the conviction was real. Outside, snow blanketed Maplewood, quieting the streets and muffling the sounds of life. Inside, Michael carried a weight that threatened to crush him, yet he refused to set it down. He was a father, and no matter how sleepless or harsh the days became, he was determined to keep moving forward. Little did he know, the hardest trials had only just begun, and each one would carve him into the man his children needed him to be. Spring brought longer days to Maplewood, but for Michael Carter, the sunlight only revealed how exposed he felt. The gossip hadn't faded since Sarah left. If anything, it had grown louder. At the grocery store, he overheard two women whispering near the produce section. "Poor kids," one said, shaking her head. "No mother at home. That man can barely take care of himself." Michael clenched his jaw, pretending not to hear, but the words cut deeper than he admitted. At the diner, where he sometimes picked up takeout, he caught the glance of old Mr. Riley, who muttered under his breath, "Never thought he'd last. Kids deserve stability, not some broken-down carpenter." Michael forced a polite nod, though anger simmered inside. He had no energy to fight words. His battles were already too many. At work, the pressure mounted. His foreman, Mr. Grady, was a man of little patience. "Carter," he barked one afternoon, "you missed 2 mornings this month. If you can't show up, don't expect to stay on the crew." Michael swallowed hard. "I'm doing my best, sir. My kids—" Grady cut him off with a scoff. "Your kids aren't my problem. Deadlines are." The message was clear. The world had no sympathy for a struggling father. Nights were no kinder. After putting Ethan and Emma to bed, Michael sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out like a battlefield. His paycheck barely covered food and utilities, leaving nothing for the mounting mortgage. The walls of the house he had once dreamed of filling with laughter now closed in with the weight of overdue notices. One evening, overwhelmed by exhaustion, Michael let his frustrations spill out. "Why does everyone think I can't do this?" he muttered aloud, slamming a fist softly against the table. Ethan, half awake in his crib, whimpered at the sudden noise. Michael immediately softened, rushing over to soothe him. "Shh, it's okay, buddy. Daddy's just tired." His voice cracked, but he forced a smile. He didn't want his children to feel his despair. Even moments of kindness felt laced with pity. Mrs. Jenkins stopped by again with a basket of muffins, saying, "You're strong, Michael, but don't let pride keep you from asking for help." He thanked her sincerely, but her gentle words reminded him that everyone around him doubted his ability to endure. He wanted support, not sympathy. The weight of isolation pressed heavily. Old friends avoided him, unsure of what to say. Couples at church whispered about Sarah's abandonment, some suggesting Michael must have done something to drive her away. Each rumor felt like a stone added to his burden. Still, in the quiet of the night, he found resilience. Sitting by the twins' cribs, he traced their tiny fingers and whispered promises. "You won't grow up ashamed of me. I'll give you everything I can. I don't care what anyone says." Ethan stirred, eyes fluttering open, while Emma sighed softly in her sleep. Their innocence anchored him. Yet doubt crept in when he looked at the unfinished bills, the unstable job, the long road ahead. He wondered if the town was right, if he was truly unfit, destined to fail. But another voice, small but insistent, urged him forward. "They're wrong. You're all they have. That has to be enough." Michael began to sense that survival alone would not be enough. He would need to fight harder, prove not just to others, but to himself, that he could build a life worthy of his children. The world seemed set against him, but in those quiet hours, holding on to the sound of his twins' breathing, he made an unshakable decision. No matter the judgment, no matter the threats, he would not break. By the time summer rolled into Maplewood, Michael's days had settled into a relentless rhythm. Work at the construction site, quick dinners thrown together with whatever he could afford, and nights filled with lullabies and restless pacing. Yet beneath the exhaustion, an idea was beginning to take root. It started one Saturday afternoon when Mrs. Jenkins asked him to fix a broken step on her porch. Michael brought over his old toolbox and got to work. As he measured, cut and sanded the wood, something unexpected happened. His hands moved with ease, almost instinctively, shaping the boards into a sturdy repair. When he finished, Mrs. Jenkins clapped her hands. "Why, Michael, this looks better than it did when it was new. You've got a gift." He laughed it off. "It's just a step, ma'am." But that night, after putting Ethan and Emma to bed, the words echoed in his head. A gift. He had always enjoyed working with his hands, not just hammering nails at the site, but creating, shaping. He remembered the birdhouse he built as a boy, the way his father had admired it. On impulse, he dragged a few scraps of lumber into the garage. The space smelled of dust and oil, cluttered with old tools. He set up a workbench from 2 sawhorses and a plank, then began cutting and sanding. Hours slipped away as he crafted a small table, rough around the edges, but solid. When he set it upright, a faint smile tugged at his lips. For the first time in months, he felt something other than survival. He felt possibility. The next evening, while Emma played with a rattle and Ethan crawled across the living room rug, Michael ran his hand over the finished table. "What do you think?" he asked softly. Ethan slapped the wood with a tiny palm and giggled. Michael chuckled. "Guess that's approval." Encouraged, he built more pieces. A chair, a small shelf, even a toy box for the twins. Each project improved slightly, his skills sharpening with practice. Yet not everyone shared his excitement. When he showed a neighbor one of his chairs, the man smirked. "Looks homemade. Nobody's going to pay for that." The dismissal stung, but Michael returned to the garage anyway. Sawdust clung to his clothes, his arms ached, but the act of creating gave him strength he hadn't felt in a long time. Some nights he worked past midnight, stopping only when one of the twins cried out. Still, failure came often. One chair collapsed when he sat on it. Another table wobbled so badly it was useless. Michael cursed under his breath, ready to give up. But then Emma would toddle into the garage, clapping her hands as if cheering him on. Ethan followed, dragging a wooden block across the floor. Their innocent support rekindled his determination. "You two don't care if it's perfect," Michael whispered, scooping them into his arms. "You just care that I'm trying. That's enough to keep me going." The heat of July pressed heavy through the open garage door. the air thick with the smell of pine and sweat. Michael wiped his brow, staring at a half-finished bookshelf. His neighbors might mock him, his co-workers might doubt him, but deep inside he felt something growing stronger than ridicule. Hope. It was still fragile, easily shaken by setbacks and exhaustion, but it was there, glowing like an ember waiting to be fanned into flame. Michael didn't know where this path would lead, but he sensed that in the quiet of his garage, with sawdust at his feet and the sound of his children's laughter drifting through the house, the first sparks of a dream had been lit. The garage had become Michael's refuge, though its air was thick with sawdust and the summer heat often left him drenched in sweat. He worked late into the evenings, crafting tables and shelves, but most of his creations gathered dust against the wall. He didn't know where to take them or how to make anyone care. Each failure gnawed at him, whispering that maybe the neighbors were right. Nobody wanted what he made. One August afternoon, while Michael was sanding the edge of a chair, a familiar voice called from the driveway. "Is that really you, Mike?" He turned to see Daniel Lewis, his old high school friend, stepping out of a dusty pickup. Daniel had been away for years, studying business in Chicago. His hair was shorter now, his clothes neater, but his grin was the same. "Dan?" Michael said, surprised. "What are you doing back in Maplewood?" "Needed a break from the city," Daniel replied, shaking his hand firmly. His eyes drifted to the scattered furniture pieces in the garage. "Looks like you've been busy." Michael rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Just keeping my hands occupied. Not like anyone's lining up to buy these." Daniel walked over, running his fingers along the grain of a small table. "You're underselling yourself. This is solid work. Ever thought of putting it online?" Michael frowned. "Online? Who's going to buy a table from some single dad in Maplewood?" "Plenty of people," Daniel said. "You'd be surprised. Folks pay good money for handmade pieces if they see them on the right platforms. I can help you set it up." Skepticism weighed heavy on Michael, but Daniel's confidence was infectious. That evening, after putting Ethan and Emma to bed, they sat at the kitchen table with Michael's old laptop. Daniel explained how online marketplaces worked, showing him photos of handcrafted furniture selling for hundreds of dollars. Michael leaned back, doubtful. "Those people probably have fancy workshops. I've got a creaky garage and second-hand tools." Daniel smirked. "Doesn't matter where you make it. What matters is quality and story. And you, my friend, have both." With Daniel's guidance, Michael uploaded photos of his best pieces. He checked the page every hour the next day, his heart lifting each time the listing refreshed. But no orders came. By the end of the week, discouragement settled in again. "See?" Michael sighed, slamming the laptop shut. "Nobody wants this." Daniel refused to let him quit. "Patience, Mike. It takes time." A few days later, an email notification pinged on his phone. Michael opened it, hardly believing the words, "Custom order request." A woman from another state wanted a dining table, willing to pay up front. He read the message aloud to Daniel, stunned. "Congratulations," Daniel said, clapping him on the back. "That's your first real chance. Don't waste it." Michael stared at the screen, a mix of fear and excitement twisting in his chest. This wasn't just another hobby project. Someone was trusting him to deliver. He looked at Ethan and Emma playing on the floor, their laughter filling the room, and felt a surge of determination. "All right," he said, voice steady. "I'll make it happen." The garage suddenly felt different, no longer just a place of failed attempts, but the beginning of something bigger. For the first time since Sarah had walked away, Michael felt like the world was giving him a small hand up instead of pushing him down. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth, but as he ran his hands over the raw lumber he had saved, Michael whispered to himself, "This is it. This is where everything changes." The order for the dining table filled Michael with both excitement and dread. He measured and remeasured the planks of oak, determined not to let his first real customer down. Night stretched long in the garage, the whine of the saw echoing into the humid August air. Sawdust coated his clothes, and his hands blistered from hours of sanding. He barely noticed the ache in his back. What mattered was proving he could do this. But almost immediately challenges piled up. The lumberyard delivered warped boards, forcing him to scrape together money for replacements. Childcare became another obstacle. Ethan caught a bad cold, keeping Michael up through the night. By day, Emma toddled around the garage, tugging at scraps of wood, nearly toppling a tool once. Michael had to pause his work constantly, torn between being a craftsman and being a father. One evening, exhausted and frustrated, he muttered aloud, "How am I supposed to finish this on time?" He ran a hand through his hair, staring at the half-assembled table. Mrs. Jenkins, who had brought over soup, placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You're only one man, Michael. Don't forget, asking for help doesn't make you weak." Her words sank deep, though pride resisted. He hated needing others, hated feeling like a burden. But when the deadline loomed closer, he finally called Daniel. "Dan, I don't think I can do this alone," Michael admitted over the phone, his voice tight with frustration. "You don't have to," Daniel replied quickly. "I'll be there tomorrow. We'll finish it together." True to his word, Daniel arrived with gloves and determination. The two men worked side by side, shaping and sanding late into the night. Daniel teased to lighten the mood. "Man, you always were stubborn. Could have asked me a week ago." Michael managed a tired laugh. "Yeah, well, I'm learning." But just when things seemed steady, another setback struck. While lifting the tabletop, Michael slipped, the heavy oak corner slamming against his forearm. Pain shot up to his shoulder, leaving him unable to grip tools properly. The injury wasn't severe enough for the hospital, but it meant he couldn't work at full strength. Panic gnawed at him. Failure was only a few days away. Daniel stepped in, handling most of the heavy lifting, while Michael directed with one good arm. It humbled him, watching his friend do the work he wanted so badly to finish himself. Yet it also opened his eyes. He didn't have to shoulder everything alone. Meanwhile, the twins sensed his stress. One night, after Emma refused to sleep, Michael sat with her in his lap, rocking gently. "I'm trying, baby girl," he whispered. "I'm giving everything I've got." Ethan stirred in his crib, blinking at him as if listening. In that moment, Michael realized that sacrifice wasn't just about exhaustion or bruises. It was about surrendering pride, accepting help, and pushing forward for the sake of something greater. Against all odds, the table was completed on time. Michael and Daniel loaded it into the truck and drove it across state lines to deliver it. The customer, a middle-aged woman with keen eyes, ran her hands over the polished oak. "This is beautiful," she said warmly. "Worth every penny." Relief washed over Michael like cool water on a hot day. He had made it, though barely. The paycheck in his pocket meant groceries, diapers, and a small dent in the mountain of bills. More than that, it meant proof. He wasn't just surviving. He was building. But as he returned home that evening, cradling a sleeping Ethan in his arms while Emma clung to his shirt, Michael knew the road ahead would not suddenly become easy. Sacrifices would continue, and setbacks would come again. Yet he also knew something had shifted. He no longer carried the weight alone. The successful delivery of that first dining table left Michael with a fragile but glowing sense of hope. For days, he replayed the customer's words in his head. "This is beautiful. Worth every penny." It was the first time in years someone had valued his work without hesitation. Still, he knew one sale couldn't change everything. His bills were still stacked, his job at the construction site remained unstable, and exhaustion lingered like a shadow. But momentum has a way of finding those who refuse to stop moving. A week later, while sipping burnt coffee at Maplewood's local cafe, Michael overheard the owner, Claire Thompson, complaining about the condition of her tables. "These things wobble every time someone sets down a cup," she said to a waitress, frustration clear in her voice. On impulse, Michael approached her. "Excuse me, Claire. I don't mean to intrude, but I could make new tables for you. Solid ones that'll last." She raised an eyebrow, doubtful. "You? Aren't you the guy whose wife—" She caught herself, softening. "I mean, I didn't know you built furniture." "I do," Michael replied, steady but humble. "I've been working on it in my garage. If you give me a chance, I'll make one for free. If you like it, we'll talk about the rest." Claire hesitated, but curiosity won. "All right, one table. Don't waste my time." That evening, Michael poured every ounce of himself into the project. He worked after the twins were asleep, the garage glowing under a single hanging bulb. He sanded until his arms burned, polished until the surface reflected light like water. When he delivered the finished table to the cafe, Claire tested it with crossed arms, setting down a mug and leaning on it. The table didn't budge. "This," she said slowly, "is good work." "How much for 6 more?" The words hit Michael like a gust of fresh wind. 6 more. An actual order. Not charity, not pity. Business. He shook her hand, hardly able to believe it. The cafe's new tables quickly caught attention. Customers complimented the craftsmanship, asking Claire where she'd bought them. Soon word spread through town. A bookstore asked for shelves. A local teacher requested a desk. What had started as a hobby in a dusty garage was beginning to look like a future. At home, the twins noticed the change in his energy. One afternoon, while sanding a chair leg, Ethan toddled over and placed his tiny hand on the wood. "Daddy make?" he asked. Michael's heart swelled. "Yeah, buddy." "Daddy made this." Emma clapped her hands, giggling as if she understood. Their pride was simple but powerful, fueling Michael's determination more than any paycheck could. Yet success didn't erase the strain. Michael still worked long shifts at the construction site, then rushed home to build furniture at night. His body ached, sleep remained scarce, and the bills were only slowly shrinking. But now, for the first time, there was a path forward. One evening, as he and Daniel loaded another finished table into the truck, Daniel grinned. "See? I told you this would work. People want your stuff, Mike. This is just the beginning." Michael wiped sweat from his brow, smiling despite the fatigue. "I guess they do. Feels like maybe I'm not just surviving anymore." The air was warm with the scent of fresh-cut wood, the hum of cicadas rising in the distance. Michael looked at his hands, rough and blistered, yet steady. For years, they had carried burdens, wiped tears, and held children close. Now those same hands were building something stronger, something that might just carry them all into a better life. And though he didn't yet know how far it would go, Michael sensed this was more than a small win. It was a breakthrough, the first true step into a future worth fighting for. Business was finally beginning to take shape. Between the cafe's order, the bookstore's shelves, and word of mouth around Maplewood, Michael was busier than ever. The garage was no longer a place of failed experiments, but a workshop alive with the hum of tools and the smell of fresh lumber. For the first time since Sarah left, Michael allowed himself to believe that things were turning around. Then, on a crisp October morning, his past came knocking. He opened the door to find Sarah standing on the porch. She wore a neat coat, her hair styled just as he remembered, though her eyes carried a sharpness he hadn't seen before. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Michael," she finally said, her voice steady, "we need to talk." He felt his stomach twist. "What are you doing here, Sarah?" Her gaze shifted toward the living room, where Ethan and Emma's toys were scattered. "They're my children, too. I want them back." Michael's chest tightened. "Back? You walked away, Sarah. You left them when they needed you most." "I wasn't ready," she snapped, defensive, "but I am now. I can give them what you can't. Stability, opportunities, a proper home." Michael's hands curled into fists at his sides. "They have a home. With me. They're safe, they're loved, and I've worked myself to the bone to make sure of it." The argument carried into the kitchen, voices rising until Emma's cry from the crib cut through the tension. Michael lifted her, rocking gently until she quieted. Sarah watched, her expression softening for a flicker of a moment, then hardening again. "I'll be filing for custody," she declared, her tone cold. "You can't keep them from me." The words hit Michael harder than any blow. After she left, he sat at the table, head in his hands. The workshop orders, the bills, the endless nights. None of it mattered if he lost Ethan and Emma. That evening, Daniel stopped by to help load a shelf. Seeing Michael's drawn face, he asked, "What happened?" "She's back," Michael said, voice low. "Sarah. She wants custody." Daniel froze. "You've got to fight this, Mike. You've been raising them alone. Everyone in this town knows it." Michael nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. Court meant lawyers, fees he could barely afford, and reliving the pain of her abandonment. Still, one thought drowned out the fear. I will not let anyone take my children from me. Word spread quickly, as it always did in Maplewood. Some townsfolk whispered that Sarah had every right to return. Others sided with Michael, remembering the nights he worked double shifts to feed his kids. The weight of public judgment pressed harder than ever, but Michael tried to block it out. In the quiet hours, he studied legal forms by the dim kitchen light. He rehearsed in his head what he would say before a judge. Most nights, he ended up kneeling by the twins' beds, whispering promises. "No one's going to take you away, not while I'm breathing." The anxiety bled into his work. Cuts weren't as precise, finishes not as smooth. One evening, after sanding the same board for an hour without progress, Michael dropped it and buried his face in his hands. He wanted to be strong, but fear was eating at him from the inside. Mrs. Jenkins found him sitting on the porch late one night, staring into the darkness. "You're a good father, Michael," she said gently. "Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. Love counts more than anything a lawyer can argue." Her words steadied him, if only slightly. He knew the battle ahead would test everything he had built, his patience, his strength, and his faith in himself. But as he looked through the window at Ethan and Emma sleeping peacefully, Michael understood something clearly. This was no longer about survival or dreams. It was about protecting the heart of his world, and he was ready to face Sarah, no matter the cost. The weeks that followed Sarah's return were some of the hardest Michael had ever faced. Court papers arrived in a thick envelope, heavy with words designed to strip him of the life he had built. He sat at the kitchen table staring at the documents, the legal jargon swimming before his eyes. He felt outmatched, unprepared, and terrified. But when Ethan tugged at his sleeve and Emma climbed into his lap, he knew surrender was not an option. With Daniel's help, Michael found a small-town lawyer, Mr. Richest, a grey-haired man who carried himself with calm assurance. Their first meeting was nerve-wracking. Michael sat across the desk, twisting his cap in his hands. "Mr. Carter," Richardson said, adjusting his glasses, "I've read the papers. Your wife's case is weak. She abandoned the children, and you've been their sole caretaker. But we'll need witnesses, people who can testify to your devotion." Michael nodded slowly. "I'll do whatever it takes. I can't lose them." Court day arrived with cold November skies. Michael wore his only suit, the fabric a little tight at the shoulders, but he stood tall as he walked into the courthouse. His heart pounded as he saw Sarah across the room, her expression unreadable. Ethan and Emma were not present. They were too young. But their absence only sharpened Michael's determination. The proceedings were brutal. Sarah's lawyer painted Michael as overwhelmed, a struggling single father barely scraping by. Michael sat rigid, each word a dagger. When his turn came, he spoke carefully, his voice trembling but steady enough. "I'm not perfect," he admitted. "I've made mistakes. I've been tired, broke, and scared more times than I can count. But I never walked away. I stayed. I worked every day to keep a roof over their heads and food on their plates. My children know who tucks them in every night, who holds them when they're sick, who shows up no matter how hard it gets. That's me. And I won't stop." Neighbors filled the benches, some nodding as he spoke. Mrs. Jenkins testified, her voice firm. "I've seen him carry those babies through sleepless nights, work 2 jobs, and still smile at them as if they were his whole world. He is their world." Daniel spoke too, describing the sacrifices Michael made to provide. He could have given up plenty of times, but he never did. "Those kids are thriving because of him." When the judge finally spoke, silence gripped the room. Given the evidence of abandonment and the clear demonstration of Mr. Carter's devotion, custody will remain with him. Case dismissed. Michael exhaled, the tension draining from his body like a floodgate opening. Sarah rose quickly, her face tight with frustration. Without a word, she turned and walked out of the courtroom. Outside, the cold air stung his cheeks, but Michael barely felt it. Relief washed over him, followed by a swell of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. Daniel clapped him on the back. "You did it, Mike. You held on." When he arrived home, Ethan and Emma rushed into his arms, their little voices shouting, "Daddy!" He held them close, breathing in their warmth, knowing he had secured not just legal custody, but something greater, the bond that no judge could ever sever. That night, as he tucked them into bed, Emma reached up to pat his face. "Daddy stay?" she murmured sleepily. "Always," Michael whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "Always." For the first time in months, he slept deeply, no longer haunted by the fear of losing them. The battle had been fought, and he had emerged with not just victory, but the unshakable strength of knowing he was enough for his children. And though the challenges of life had not disappeared, Michael knew this. With Ethan and Emma by his side, there was nothing left in the world he couldn't face. The victory in court gave Michael more than custody. It gave him clarity. He was no longer fighting just to hold his family together. Now he wanted to build something lasting, something that would carry Ethan and Emma into a brighter future. The garage, once a refuge and workshop, was now bursting at the seams with orders. Tables leaned against the walls, chairs filled every corner, and scraps of lumber cluttered the floor. It was no longer enough. One evening, Daniel stopped by to help load another order. He looked around the cramped space and shook his head. "Mike, you've outgrown this place. If you want to keep up with demand, you need a real workshop." Michael sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I can't afford it." "You can't afford not to," Daniel countered. "Think about it. A bigger space means bigger projects, more orders, more income. I'll help you set up the paperwork. Let's do this together." The idea terrified Michael, but it also thrilled him. That weekend, they found a small warehouse on the edge of town. The rent was modest, but still a stretch. Signing the lease felt like stepping into the unknown, yet Michael's hand didn't shake. He knew this was the next step. The first weeks in the new space were chaotic. Tools had to be arranged, safety measures put in place, and orders kept rolling in. Michael often worked past midnight, his body aching but his spirit alive. Ethan and Emma visited the shop after school, wide-eyed at the stacks of lumber and the hum of machines. "Can I help, Daddy?" Ethan asked one afternoon, gripping a piece of sandpaper with both hands. Michael smiled, guiding him to a smooth edge. "Sure, buddy. Just like this. Gentle." Emma perched on a stool, watching closely. "I want to help too." "Of course," Michael said, handing her a small brush. "You can dust off the shavings." The sight of his children in the shop filled him with pride. They weren't just growing up around his work, they were part of it. Still, growth brought new challenges. Taxes, invoices, and shipping logistics weighed heavily on him. One evening, surrounded by stacks of receipts, Michael groaned. "I can build a table blindfolded, but these numbers, they're going to kill me." Daniel chuckled, sliding into the chair beside him. "That's what I'm here for. You handle the wood, I'll handle the books." Their partnership became the backbone of the business. Daniel managed online sales, marketing, and paperwork, while Michael focused on craftsmanship. Together they turned orders into steady income, yet the pace was grueling. Michael often rose before dawn, dropping the twins at school before rushing to the shop. He worked all day, then returned home to cook dinner and help with homework. Some nights he collapsed into bed with splinters still in his hands. One Friday evening, Emma tugged at his sleeve as he reviewed designs at the kitchen table. "Daddy, you're always working." The words stung. He closed the notebook, pulling her onto his lap. "I know, sweetheart, but everything I'm doing, it's for you and Ethan. So you'll never have to worry like I did." She rested her head on his shoulder, whispering, "I don't care about tables. I just want you." Her words settled deep in his heart. Michael realized success would mean nothing if it came at the cost of being present. From that night on, he made a rule. Sundays were for family, no exceptions. They picnicked in the park, played board games, and laughed until the house echoed with joy. The business was growing, the demands increasing, but Michael was learning balance. With Daniel's partnership, the children's encouragement, and his own grit, he was transforming more than wood. He was transforming his life. And while new obstacles loomed ahead, he knew now that growth didn't just mean expansion. It meant learning when to fight, when to lean on others, and when to simply stop and breathe with the people he loved most. With the new workshop up and running, orders flowed steadily. Michael's furniture began appearing not only in Maplewood homes, but in shops across nearby towns. Each delivery carried the scent of polished oak and pine, the kind of craftsmanship people whispered about with admiration. But as his name spread, so did resentment. One evening, Daniel dropped a local newspaper on Michael's workbench. The headline read, "Carter Woodworks Making Waves in Regional Market." Michael grinned, pride swelling. But Daniel's expression was serious. "Mike, not everyone's happy about this." He explained that Whitman Furniture, a long-established company in the area, had noticed their rise. Owned by a stern businessman named Charles Whitman, the company had dominated the local market for decades. "They see you as competition," Daniel warned. At first, Michael shrugged it off. "Let them. There's room for everyone." But soon the rivalry turned sharp. Negative reviews appeared online, strangely similar in wording. Orders were cancelled suddenly, with customers claiming they'd heard Carter's products were cheaply made. One afternoon, Michael discovered a batch of lumber delivered to his shop was deliberately warped. Sabotage. Frustration boiled over. "Why are they doing this?" he muttered, slamming a plank onto the bench. "Because you're a threat," Daniel replied. "That's how business works sometimes. They're scared." The pressure weighed heavily. Long nights at the shop were now filled with doubt. Michael worried each order would be undermined, each customer stolen. And in town, whispers started again, this time not about Sarah, but about his legitimacy. "He's just a guy in a garage who got lucky," someone sneered at the grocery store. "Won't last against real companies." Michael tried to block it out, but the voices echoed in his mind when he lay awake at night. He felt that old weight of failure creeping back, the same shadow he had battled when Sarah left. Still, the twins reminded him why he couldn't give in. One evening, as he sat at the table staring at a half-finished invoice, Ethan climbed into his lap holding a crayon drawing. "Daddy, look, it's your shop." Michael studied the picture, a square building, crooked but recognizable, with stick figures inside. Him, Ethan, and Emma. Above it, in wobbly letters, Ethan had written, "Daddy's work makes people happy." Michael's throat tightened. This is perfect, buddy. "Thank you," Emma piped up from across the room. "We tell everyone our daddy makes the best tables, better than anyone." Their pride cut through the noise of doubt louder than any gossip. Michael realized that reputation wasn't built on rumors or rivalries. It was built on consistency, honesty, and love poured into the work itself. Determined to fight back, he and Daniel began reaching out directly to customers, offering tours of the workshop and sharing the story behind each piece. Word of mouth returned stronger, fueled not by advertisements but by real trust. One Saturday, during a delivery, a customer told Michael, "I almost cancelled after hearing things about your company, but then I saw how much people love what you're doing, and I decided to give it a chance. I'm glad I did. This is the best furniture I've ever owned." The validation steadied him. Rivals could spread lies, but truth would always stand taller. Back at the shop, Daniel slapped him on the shoulder. "See, you don't beat doubt by yelling louder. You beat it by showing up every single day, and that's what you do best." Michael nodded, his resolve hardening. He had faced gossip, abandonment, and fear before, and survived. Rivalries and doubters were just another storm to endure. And this time, he wasn't facing it alone. As the machines hummed and sawdust floated through beams of golden light, Michael knew his fight wasn't just about keeping a business alive. It was about proving to his children, his town, and himself that perseverance would always outlast doubt. Winter settled over Maplewood, coating the streets in snow and filling chimneys with smoke. Inside the workshop, warmth radiated from the steady hum of machines, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut wood. Michael worked tirelessly, but this time the orders were no longer just from locals. His online store, fueled by Daniel's clever marketing, was catching national attention. It began with a viral post. A customer from Chicago shared photos of a Carter Woodworks dining set, praising the craftsmanship. Within days, messages flooded in. Do you ship nationwide? Can you make custom designs? Michael and Daniel scrambled to keep up, their phones buzzing non-stop. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, Michael sat at the kitchen table staring at the glowing screen of his laptop. Dozens of new orders filled the inbox. He rubbed his temples, overwhelmed. Dan, this is too much, we can't keep up. On the other end of the call, Daniel's voice was steady. That's not a problem, Mike. That's opportunity. We just need to scale. Scaling meant hiring workers, expanding supply chains, and managing logistics on a level Michael had never imagined. The thought terrified him. I started this in a garage, he said. I don't know how to run all of this, Daniel reassured him. You don't have to know everything. You just have to keep doing what you do best, building. Let me handle the rest. Still, doubt crept in at night. Michael often found himself awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was losing sight of the very reason he started. Was he chasing growth for its own sake, or was he truly building a better life for Ethan and Emma? The twins noticed his fatigue. One morning, as they ate pancakes, Emma asked softly, "Daddy, why are you always tired?" Michael paused, looking at her small, curious face. "Because Daddy's working hard to make sure you have everything you need." Ethan, chewing thoughtfully, added, "We don't need everything. We just need you." The words struck Michael harder than any financial challenge. He pulled them both close, kissing their foreheads. "And you'll always have me, no matter how busy things get." In the workshop, the team grew. Michael hired 2 young men from town who were eager to learn. Teaching them reminded him of his father, who once taught him how to hold a hammer steady. "Take your time," Michael told them. "Don't rush the wood. It'll tell you what it needs if you listen." Soon the shop buzzed with activity. Large orders rolled in from cities Michael had only visited on maps. A boutique in New York requested handcrafted bookshelves. A hotel in Denver wanted custom tables. The Carter name was spreading, and with it, responsibility weighed heavier. One Friday, as he closed up the shop, Daniel handed him a printout. "You realize what this is, right? We're profitable, really profitable. You're not just a guy making furniture anymore. You're running a brand." Michael stared at the numbers, disbelief mixing with pride. He thought back to the nights of rocking babies with one arm while sanding wood with the other, the gossip, the doubt, the court battles. And now, here he stood, leading something that reached far beyond Maplewood. Yet amidst the growth, he made sure Sundays remained sacred. The twins needed more than money. They needed memories. They built snowmen in the yard, drank cocoa by the fire, and laughed until the walls shook with joy. Expansion was thrilling, but Michael understood balance. The world might now see him as a businessman, a craftsman, an entrepreneur, but to Ethan and Emma he was still just Dad, and that was the title he cherished most. As winter thawed into spring, Michael realized the horizon was no longer just Maplewood. It stretched across the country, and he was ready to meet it, one crafted piece at a time. By the time summer returned, Carter Woodworks had become more than a small-town business. The workshop expanded into a modest factory space, its doors wide open to trucks delivering lumber and shipping crates marked for destinations across the country. Yet Michael never forgot where it all began, on the floor of his garage, with 2 children depending on him and nothing but determination to keep him moving. As business grew, he faced a new decision: who to hire. Instead of searching far and wide, Michael turned to Maplewood itself. Many of the same neighbors who once whispered doubts now stood in line for jobs. Single parents, laid-off factory workers, young people with little direction. He welcomed them all. "You're giving folks a chance," Daniel remarked one afternoon as they walked the factory floor. "Not just furniture. You're building something bigger." Michael nodded, watching his employees sand and assemble. "When I was at my lowest, I had people who believed in me. Mrs. Jenkins, you, even the kids. Now it's my turn to do the same for others." One of the first people he hired was a young mother named Carla, whose husband had left much like Sarah had. On her first day, she approached Michael, eyes glistening. "Thank you for this job. I didn't think anyone would take a chance on me." Michael smiled warmly. "Around here, we don't give up on people. Not anymore." The factory grew not only in size but in heart. Michael set aside a portion of profits to fund scholarships for single parents who wanted to pursue education. He remembered the nights he had studied baby books under a dim light, desperate for guidance, and wanted to make sure others had resources he never did. At home, Ethan and Emma were no longer toddlers. Ethan showed a knack for leadership, often organizing games with his friends and proudly announcing, "One day I'll run Dad's shop." Emma, on the other hand, loved sketching designs, covering pages with imaginative chairs and tables. She'd sit beside Michael at the workbench, explaining her ideas with a seriousness far beyond her years. "Look, Daddy," she said one evening, holding up a drawing of a curved bookshelf. "It's like a rainbow for books." Michael studied it, genuinely impressed. "That's actually brilliant, Emma. You think we could build it together?" Her eyes lit up. "Really? Really?" he said, ruffling her hair. The project became their summer tradition, father and daughter working side by side while Ethan proudly supervised. When the finished piece was displayed in the workshop, customers immediately asked to order more. Emma's grin stretched ear to ear. "Does this mean I'm a designer now?" Michael laughed. "It means you're part of the team." Seeing his children so engaged filled him with quiet pride. This was no longer just about providing. It was about passing on values of resilience, creativity, and integrity. One Sunday afternoon, while the family picnicked at the park, Daniel leaned back against the grass. "You realize what you've built, don't you? This isn't just a business anymore. It's a legacy." Michael gazed at Ethan chasing Emma through the sunshine, their laughter carrying in the warm breeze. Legacy. The word felt heavy, but not in a burdensome way. It was weight that came from knowing his children would inherit more than money. They would inherit a story of perseverance and love. That evening, as fireflies flickered outside their home, Michael tucked the twins into bed. He whispered softly, "One day this will all be yours. Not just the business, but the lessons behind it. Hard work, kindness, never giving up." Ethan yawned, half asleep. "We'll make you proud, Daddy." "You already do," Michael replied, his heart full. For the first time, he allowed himself to dream not only of survival or success, but of a future where the Carter family name stood for something greater. Resilience turned into legacy. Autumn settled over Maplewood once again, painting the trees in shades of gold and crimson. The Carter family was no longer whispered about with pity, but spoken of with admiration. Michael had become a symbol of perseverance, his children a testament to what love and resilience could build. Yet life has a way of testing even those who have climbed far. On a chilly afternoon, Michael returned from the workshop to find Sarah waiting outside his house. Her presence pulled him back to a past he thought he had closed forever. She stood straighter than before, her coat crisp, her eyes guarded but filled with something he recognized: regret. "Michael," she began, her voice low, "I've heard about your success, about the children." She hesitated, glancing toward the window where Ethan and Emma's laughter spilled into the air. "I came to see for myself." Michael's chest tightened, but his tone remained calm. "They're doing well, they're happy. That's all that matters." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the ground. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. Leaving was the worst mistake I ever made. I thought I was escaping a cage, but I see now I abandoned the best thing I ever had." For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Michael studied her, remembering the pain of empty nights, the despair of raising 2 infants alone. He felt anger stir, but it was tempered by years of growth. He no longer needed to fight her. "They needed you then," he said quietly. "And when you weren't here, I had to be both parents. I won't let them be hurt again." Sarah's eyes welled. "I don't expect to be part of their lives. I just needed to tell you that I'm sorry." Michael nodded slowly. "I accept that, but the past stays where it is. My children know who stood by them, and that won't change." She swallowed hard, then turned to leave. Michael watched her walk down the street until she vanished among the falling leaves. Instead of bitterness, what he felt most was closure. That evening, Ethan asked, "Daddy, who was that lady?" Michael paused, choosing his words carefully. "Someone from the past, someone who made choices she can't undo. But what matters is the choices we make now, together." Emma tilted her head. "Like building furniture?" Michael smiled faintly. "Exactly. Building something strong that lasts." The moment settled deep within him. Sarah's return had not shaken him. It had reminded him of how far he and the twins had come. The man who once cried into silence, holding two helpless babies, was gone. In his place stood a father who had built not only a business, but a family bound by loyalty and love. As the days shortened, the Carter home filled with warmth. Ethan proudly worked alongside Michael at the factory, while Emma refined her sketches into real designs customers adored. Each piece carried their mark, the Carter legacy weaving itself into every grain of wood. One Sunday evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sun set over Maplewood, Michael spoke softly. "Life has a way of coming full circle, but what we've built, it's ours. No one can take that away." Ethan leaned against him. "We're the richest family in town, aren't we, Dad?" Michael chuckled. "Not because of money, because of love. That's what makes us rich." Emma smiled, her small hand slipping into his, and in that simple gesture Michael felt the truth of his words. The world had tested them, doubted them, even tried to tear them apart. But together they had built something unshakable. The circle was complete, and the Carters stood stronger than ever. By the time spring returned to Maplewood, the Carter name had become more than familiar. It had become a symbol. Carter Woodworks wasn't just a business anymore. It was part of the town's identity, a source of pride for people who had once doubted Michael. Trucks bearing the Carter logo rolled down Main Street, and families pointed them out with admiration. Yet inside the Carter home, life remained grounded in laughter, routine, and love. Ethan, now tall enough to help lift smaller boards, often stood beside his father in the workshop. "Careful," Michael would remind him, steadying his grip. "Strength is good, but patience makes the work last." Ethan nodded, soaking in every lesson, eager to prove himself. Emma, her sketchbooks filled with creative designs, became Michael's unofficial partner. She approached him one afternoon, holding out a drawing of a bed frame shaped like intertwining branches. "Do you think this could really work, Dad?" Michael studied the sketch, his heart swelling. "With a little teamwork, absolutely." She beamed, her confidence growing with every idea he took seriously. The workshop no longer belonged only to him. It was theirs. The town watched in quiet awe as the Carter family thrived. Neighbors who once whispered gossip now praised Michael openly. At church, at the diner, at the grocery store, people greeted him with respect. But Michael never let pride overtake him. He remembered too clearly the nights when he'd nearly broken under the weight of despair. One evening, sitting on the porch with Daniel, Michael reflected aloud. "Funny, isn't it? Everyone talks about money now, about how we're the richest family in town. But when I think of wealth, I don't think of the bank account." Daniel leaned back, sipping his coffee. "What do you think of, then?" Michael's gaze drifted toward the yard, where Ethan and Emma chased fireflies, their laughter ringing through the warm night. "I think of this, them. The fact that we survived everything meant to tear us apart, and we did it together." Daniel smiled knowingly. "Then you've already won more than most men ever will." Michael carried that truth with him. The business flourished, yes, but what truly mattered were the quiet moments, the pancakes in the morning, the drawings taped to the fridge, the hugs that erased the hardest days. That was the wealth no one could measure. As the sun dipped low one evening, Michael gathered the twins on the porch. The sky glowed orange and purple, the fields stretching endlessly before them. "Do you know why people call us the richest family in town?" he asked softly. Ethan grinned. "Because of all the tables we sell?" Michael chuckled. "Not exactly. It's because no amount of money can buy what we have. Love, trust, and the strength to keep going no matter what." "That's real wealth." Emma rested her head on his shoulder. "Then we're the luckiest family too." Michael kissed the top of her head, his voice steady with gratitude. "Yes, sweetheart. The luckiest." The Carter family's journey had begun with heartbreak, judgment, and fear, but it had transformed into a story of resilience, of building something beautiful out of broken pieces. They had faced doubt, rivals, and even the return of the past, and in the end, they emerged stronger, bound not by wealth, but by love. And before we close this chapter, take a moment to subscribe to this channel for more stories of strength, hope, and transformation. And don't forget to click the video suggested on your screen. You won't want to miss the next journey waiting for you. That night, as Michael watched Ethan and Emma fall asleep, he realized he no longer feared the future. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, and together they would always remain the richest family in town.